Onto your headphones and pour your favorite beverage. It's time for the Kickin or Stickin Fantasy Football Podcast. Now, fresh off the sidelines, your host, Matt McPeak.
Fantasy freaks and geeks, what is up? Welcome to the Week 3 preview episode of the Kickin or Stickin Fantasy Football Podcast. I am the host, Matt McPeak. Thank you very much for joining me here. Hopefully you were able to tune into the Thursday night preview episode that I dropped a couple hours ago. I'm recording this at 6:15 on Thursday night. Week 2 kind of sucked. We lost a lot of guys, a lot of dudes going down with ACL injuries. The 49ers lost two of their best defensive linemen, two of their best defensive players. And we saw two of the top 2 or 3 picks in probably every single draft. Both went down. Christian McCaffrey's probably going to miss a good 4 to 6 weeks here. And Saquon Barkley might miss the entire year. I'm pretty sure I saw that was a season ender, so no good there. But this is where the good fantasy players are separated from the average fantasy players. Who was able to draft for depth during draft night, and who's going to be active on the waiver wire. It's what's going to really make the difference between teams that can stay in it after these big injuries and teams that kind of just turn into a 500 team. So, like I said, we already did the Thursday night preview. So let's get into this first game here. The Bears at the Falcons. Last week, David Montgomery had over 120 yards, total yards on 19 touches against the Giants. The Falcons gave up almost the same exact yardage to Ezekiel Elliott in week 1. The Falcons gave a touchdown to Carlos Hyde and 2 touchdowns to Chris Carson. So I think David Montgomery is a pretty solid play here. I wish I could say there are some other options for the Bears in the passing game to play in this one, but the Falcons are giving up 78 points in the first 2 weeks of the season. DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett each had over 90 yards receiving in week 1, and then CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper each had over 100 yards receiving in week 2. So it looks like Atlanta's secondary is still pretty bad, but the Bears really spread the ball around against the Giants. 12 different guys had at least one target. Allen Robinson got a nice chunk of that, 32% of the targets. He's probably the only pass catcher worth starting for the Bears. I got burned by Anthony Miller in week 2, only 3 targets and no catches. I think Tariq Cohen is also a sit until we see him get more passes thrown his way. That was kind of the big thing that got him drafted, was the idea that he was going to catch, between 50 and 60 balls this year. For the Falcons, Ridley had another big game. He's establishing himself as a legit number 1 wide receiver. Hayden Hurst had a nice game in week 2, and I think this is another good spot for him. The Bears allowed 60 yards and a touchdown in week 1 to TJ Hawkinson, then 60 yards to Evan Ingram last week. I'm not crazy about Gurley going forward. He's not seeing the targets. Only 5 of the 12 running back targets so far have gone Gurley's way, and Brian Hill is averaging a full yard more per carry. So things aren't going Todd Gurley's way so far. It's one of the reasons why I stayed away from him on draft night this past year. Next, we got the Bengals at the Eagles. The Browns did a really good job against Joe Mixon last week, held him to just under 46 yards rushing. Mixon still had a respectable stat line with the 40 yards receiving on 4 catches, but if he doesn't get it going against this Eagles D-line, then I think it might be time to start getting concerned about Mixon. The Eagles gave up 2 rushing touchdowns to Peyton Barber in week 1, and then 191 rushing yards to the Rams last week. A.J. Green saw the majority of the targets again in week 2, but he's only caught 8 of his 22 targets on the season. Tyler Boyd, on the other hand, has caught 11 of his 13. So I'm hoping as a Tyler Boyd owner in several leagues, we see some more of those targets go Boyd's way. One guy that might be in line for some serious work is Drew Sample. Sample already has seen 10 of the 21 tight end targets, and with C.J. Uzama now out for the season, I'm pretty sure as well, Sample should be the guy for them. And the Eagles have been, let's say, not that great against tight ends in the early part of the season here. 3 touchdowns allowed Tyler Higbee last week, and Logan Thomas scored in week 1. So this could be a good week to take a flyer at the tight end, Drew Sample. Maybe a deep league or a DFS, one of those cheap tight ends that you can play. For the Eagles, Sanders and the tight ends remain the only reliable fantasy options. Last time I saw, Jalen Reagor is now doubtful for this game. So the woes of the Eagle wide receiving core continue. Next, we got the Texans at the Steelers. This is one of my picks against the spread, so stay tuned for that one. Next, Raiders at Patriots. I thought the Raider defense was going to be average at best after they gave up 30 points in week 1 to the Panthers, but they played pretty well on Monday night against the Saints, albeit without Michael Thomas. It took another 2 rushing touchdowns from Cam Newton for the Patriots to have a chance in Seattle, I just don't see that holding up all season. I'm sitting all Patriots besides Cam until this offense looks like a pro offense and not a high school one. For the Raiders, I think it's just Jacobs and Waller for now. Hunter Renfrow and these rookie wide receivers have not done anywhere near enough for me to have any confidence in starting them. Rams at the Bills. I know it's only 2 games, but the Rams are starting to impress me. They have gotten back to running the ball. They're not just doing it with one guy. They're doing it with 3 guys now, so they can keep these guys fresh. Tyler Higbee is a must-start at this point, especially this week. The Bills let Chris Herndon catch 6 of his 7 targets last week, or in week 1, sorry. And then they just gave up a 100-yard game to tight end Mike Gesicki. So go ahead and just keep playing Tyler Higbee in your starting tight end spot. With Cam Akers dealing with an injury, I think Darrell Henderson has earned flex consideration. Obviously, Diggs, Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods are all starts here. The question to me, which is pretty much every week, is for the Bills, what do we do with frickin' John Brown? He's got 2 touchdowns in 2 games so far this season, so I guess keep rolling him out there if you've been counting on him. He is definitely benefiting from Stephon Diggs being out there. And Josh Allen has shown us to be a stud. Might be the second best quarterback from that 2018 draft class as of right now. Next, we got the 49ers at the Giants. I don't know what to make of this game. So many question marks with all the injuries. We lost Barkley. Mostert is looking doubtful for week 2. And the 49ers also lost T.J. Watt and Solomon Thomas. So that D-line, which was one of the best in football last year, is now going to get seriously tested. But I don't know how much they're really going to get tested in week 3 with the Giants' subpar offensive line. And the touches are getting split between Dion Lewis and Wayne Gallman. The Giants also had Sterling Shepard leave a game early, and I'm pretty sure I saw he's got turf toe, so he's going to be on IR. I think the only guys you can confidently play from the Giants are Evan Ingram and Golden Tate, and not because I like them, but just simply because there's really nobody else for this offense to get the ball to. For the 49ers, probably the most injured team so far this season. They're without their starting running back, tight end, quarterback, and number 1 wide receiver, all most likely missing week 3. But I have to say their backup quarterback, Nick Mullins, is no slouch. I remember a couple years ago, it was like a Monday night game. He came in and he played really well. Against the bad Giants secondary, I would not be surprised if Mullins came out and had a decent game. So pretty disappointed. I had a Brandon Ayuk over 3.5 receptions prop last week, which did not hit, but I will be looking at the Kendrick Bourne and Jordan Reed props for week 3. The Giants were not very good against tight ends last year, and if there's one coach that knows how to get the ball to a very athletic tight end, it's Kyle Shanahan. So interesting game there. The Titans and the Vikings, this one is the second game I got against the spread, so we will get to that game in a bit. Next is the Washington football team and the Cleveland Browns. Antonio Gibson surprisingly led the team in carries last week, but only saw 2 targets. The Browns' rushing defense has done a pretty good job so far. They kept the Ravens running backs to 3.2 yards per carry, which is not easy with Lamar Jackson running that zone read back there. And then the Browns, they kept Joe Mixon to under 3 yards per carry on Thursday night last week. So if we see Gibson get more targets, I'd be willing to play him this week, but I would sit him until we see that workload go to him. He needs to be active in the passing game. I really don't see him being, a 15 to 16 carry guy. The Browns defense has already allowed 9 passing plays of over 15 yards, so I do like Terry McLaurin. But that's about it as far as the Washington football team goes. Washington has allowed the combo of DeAndre Hopkins and Larry Fitzgerald to catch 15 of their 16 targets last week. So both Browns wide receivers are good plays this week, and I think both Browns running backs have made themselves must starts. Chubb is a number 1 running back, maybe number 2, and Hunt is definitely a number 2, if not a top tier flex. Austin Hooper has only caught 4 catches on 6 targets so far this year for 37 yards. But I'm not giving up on him yet. I'm sitting him this week, but I'm waiting another week or 2 before I cut him. Dan Arnold did pretty much nothing last week against the Washington defense, but in week 1, Dallas Goedert had a huge game, over 100 yards on 8 catches, and Ertz scored in that game. So maybe this is the week that Austin Hooper gets back on track. For the Panthers and the Chargers, this is one of my over-under plays for the week, so we'll get to this game, but quickly, one guy from this game that you need to get into your DFS lineup if you're playing FanDuel or DraftKings Daily Fantasy this week, Austin Eckler. He's the 10th most expensive running back, which I think is crazy value for him. In this matchup, I think of all the top-tier running backs, I think he has one of the best matchups, and he has by far the best value. The Panthers were horrible against the run last year, and so far this year, they've been abused by Josh Jacobs and Leonard Fournette, and Ronald Jones scored as well. So get Austin Eckler into your lineups. Jets and Colts. The Jets look terrible again this year. The Colts were coming off of a big bounce-back game against the Vikings. Jonathan Taylor had 100 yards rushing with a touchdown. A couple standout guys from the Colts. Mo Alley Cox had over 100 yards receiving. The Jets just gave up 2 touchdowns to Jordan Reed coming in off the street, so not a bad matchup for him. And the rookie Michael Pittman he led the Colts in wide receiver targets and receiving yards with the third-year guy Paris Campbell getting hurt, which that one kind of sucks too. Pittman also tied for the most targets on the team, so Pittman's role could be quickly increasing, and T.Y. Hilton has been kind of quiet in 2020, but the Jets have allowed receptions of 20 yards or more so far. It's 4 different receivers, so I think T.Y. could get himself one of those big bombs this week. The Jets have no one. Le'Veon Bell is out. Crowder is looking doubtful. Chris Herndon blew his chance last week. He had a great opportunity to show everybody that he can be relied on when the rest of the team is down, and he did nothing for us. The betting side of me is screaming, bet the Jets under team total. Yesterday I saw it was at 17.5. Now it's down to 16, so you might have missed the boat on that, but like I said last week, every time I bet either for or against the Jets, I get screwed, so I probably won't be betting this, and of course, they'll probably finish with freaking 10 points. The Cowboys at the Seahawks, that game is my other over-under play. We'll get to that in a minute. The Lions-Cardinals, this is the last game of my 3-legger against the spread, so we'll also get to that in a minute. Buccaneers at Broncos. It seems like Leonard Fournette kind of took the number 1 back spot from the Bucs last week with his 100-yard game against the Panthers. The Broncos gave up over 100 yards rushing to Derrick Henry in week 1 and then again to James Conner in week 2 on only 16 carries for Conner. So it looks like a pretty good matchup for the Bucs running backs. I'm going to guess that we see a more even split of carries between Fournette and Ronald Jones on the road in Denver. It's never easy for those road running backs up in Denver and Mile High. Jones did have a touchdown last week, so maybe we can get away with playing both of them. Scotty Miller was a huge disappointment last week. Only 2 catches on 3 targets in the absence of Chris Godwin. Hopefully Godwin is good to go this week, so we don't have to worry about whether or not to play Scotty Miller. I'm sure he will make some plays this year, but I'm not going to trust him again this week. I don't have to tell you to start Mike Evans, I hope, but him and Brady look like they are getting something brewing together there. They connected on 2 deep balls in the first quarter last week. For the Broncos, Cortland Sutton is now out for the year, and Drew Lock is likely out for at least a month, plus maybe even 6 weeks. So the rookie wide receivers in Denver will now have to try and carry the load with the backup quarterback, Jeff Driscoll. I'm staying away from all of them. I would consider sitting Melvin Gordon as well against this Bucs run defense that was number 1 in yards per carry last year and yards per game, I believe. If not for Melvin Gordon's receiving touchdown, he would have finished under 10 fantasy points with Driscoll at quarterback, and Royce Freeman looked pretty good on his 3 carries last week, so Gordon kind of makes me nervous. 2 more games here. We got the Buccaneers at the Saints. The Packers are running the ball with a lot of success this season, but the Saints D is going to be a much bigger test for them than the Lions or the Vikings were. The Saints D has kept Josh Jacobs to under 3.2 yards per carry on 27 attempts, and they kept Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette to under 3.2 yards per carry as well. Devontae Adams will draw Marcus Lattimore, a top 4 or 5 corner in this league, so I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to be able to just pummel him with targets like he usually does. It's unclear whether Michael Thomas will play in this game or not, and it doesn't have the same feel as this game would if the fans were allowed. These primetime Saints games on Sunday night in New Orleans are usually always awesome games, but it should still be fun. I just don't know where all the offense is going to come from. The total is set at 52.5 right now, so I guess they're counting on big games from Alvin Kamara. And the guy who scored in each game so far, tight end Jared Cook for the Saints, he also has an added element of revenge. Yeah. So 2 revenge games back-to-back for Jared Cook. He spent 1 year with the Packers before he went to the Raiders. But if Thomas does not go in week 3, I would look to Traquan Smith's receiving yard props. He went over by like 30 yards last week. I think he had 80-something receiving yards. Wish I had Traquan's over on receiving yards and not Emmanuel Sanders, because I would have been a $450 richer man, but that's the way it goes. Last but not least, the Chiefs at the Ravens. This game is pretty easy. It's set at the 3rd highest total of the week for a reason. It should be a shootout. Play everybody. It's going to be frustrating this year with the Ravens running backs, but I think you just kind of roll with them, Ingram and Dobbins, because they're both going to have big games throughout the year, and I think they both have huge upside enough to play week to week. This game is also one of my picks, which we will end the show on, if you know what I'm saying. So let's take a minute and let's get over to the Week 3 podcast picks for Week 3. What do you know? All right, the Week 3 podcast picks. So I went 6-3 in Week 2. Same as I did in Week 1. I'm now 12-6 on the year. My 3-legger against the spread hit for a nice little 7-1 payout. That was the Packers minus 6.5 hosting the Lions, the Rams minus 1.5 as road favorites in Philly, and the Ravens minus 7 at the Texans. I missed on both my over and my under. I had the Giants-Bears going over 42.5, missed by 12 points. The Saquon Barkley injury definitely hurt the odds of that over hitting, but the Bears only put up 3 points after a first quarter fumble by Daniel Jones in New York territory. Then in the second quarter, Daniel Jones threw a pick in Bears territory, and both kickers missed a field goal in this game, so if it weren't so sloppy of the offenses, I think I might have hit on that. My under on Cleveland-Cincinnati Thursday night was dead before the fourth quarter even started. So not very good week for me for the over-unders. I hit on 2 of the 3 touchdown scorer props. Zeke Elliott and Ronald Jones both scored, but I missed on Mark Andrews' Rats. But I did hit on my road dog of the week for Week 2, so that's 2 weeks in a row. I hit on my road dog. I had the Falcons getting 4.5 points at Dallas, and they wouldn't have even needed the points if their hands team, quote-unquote hands team, knew what the hell they were doing there. standing around waiting for the kick. Obviously, either of those guys are complete idiots or they were never coached on that situation. The kicking team are not the ones that have to wait for the ball to go 10 yards. The kicking team are the ones that have to wait. The return team is not. So that's pretty pathetic. But here we go with my Week 3 picks. 3-legger against the spread. Starting off with the Steelers, -3.5 at home against the Texans. The Steelers have been playing great. They're outscoring the Giants and the Broncos so far, 52-37. The Texans defense has had probably the toughest start of the season with Kansas City and Baltimore, and now they got to go to Pittsburgh. I think the Texans offense is still figuring out life without DeAndre Hopkins. I don't expect the running backs to do much at all in this game, so give me the Steelers -3.5 points. Next, the Arizona Cardinals -5.5 at home against the Lions. The Lions of Detroit. Another good look to me is the first half over 28 in this game. The Cardinals put up 20 points in the first half of their game last week, and Detroit scored 14 in the first quarter of their blowout loss to Green Bay. The Lions generally start off good, and then they just kind of die out. The defense has not looked any better this year. They gave up 3 touchdown passes to Mitchell Trubisky in Week 1, and then they got steamrolled by the Packers in Week 2. Aaron Jones had a 236 total yard game and 3 touchdowns last week. I think Kenyon Drake has a bust-out game in 2020, or his first bust-out game of 2020. Hopkins, Fitz, and Kirk are really starting to look like the best wide receiving core in the league. Kyler Murray now has 3 rushing touchdowns and over 150 rushing yards on this 2-game season. I think this offense continues to roll and wins by a good 10 points. One thing I do like for the Lions, it looks like Kenny Galladay will be a game-time decision, so I like T.J. Hawkinson to score. Cardinals were historically bad against tight ends last year. We saw the 49ers beat them up in the first game of the week, and Logan Thomas last week dropped 2 red zone targets. I think a better athlete like Hawkinson with more opportunity and a much better quarterback should benefit in this game. Next, the Titans -2.5 at the Vikings. The Packers running backs rushed for just a smidge under 5 yards per carry in Week 1, and then the Vikings gave up 4.5 yards per carry to the rookie Jonathan Taylor in the first half of last week's game. Taylor finished with 100 yards. I think the Titans go up to Minnesota and just pound on the Vikings. The Vikings defense is not what it used to be. I've been saying all offseason how young the Vikings secondary was going to be. They're without their best pass rusher in Danielle Hunter. He's on IR, and they now have 2 linebackers on IR with Anthony Barr missing the rest of the season with a torn pectoral muscle. That's in your chest, kids. For my over this week, I'm going with the Cowboys at the Seahawks, over 55.5. It's the highest total of the week. Vegas expects this to be a high-scoring game. The Seahawks' first 2 games have been 64 and 65 total points. The Cowboys are coming off of a 79-point game in Week 2 against the Falcons. These are 2 of the most explosive offenses in the NFL. I'm going to go with the highest total of the week for my over. And for my under, I'm going to go Panthers at the Chargers, under 44 points. Without Christian McCaffrey there to keep the offense ahead of the chains, I think the Panthers struggle in this one on the road. For the Chargers, we will most likely see the rookie at quarterback again after Tyrod Taylor had his lung accidentally punctured by one of the team doctors trying to give him a pain injection for his broken rib. Guessing that guy's going to be out of work going forward. We saw them only put up 17 points last week, and as bad as the Panthers' defense has looked, I think they can keep the Chargers to under 21 points again in this one. If the Panthers' defense scares you off of this under, which I wouldn't blame you at all, I would definitely take a look at the 49ers-Giants game with so many guys getting hurt. I think the over-under for that one is right now at 41.5. I got kind of scared off of that one just because I really do think Nick Mullins is one of the better backups in this league, and Kyle Shanahan's one of the best coaches in the league. I think he's going to be able to get enough out of him. Next is my three-legger touchdown scorer parlay. So I got Mike Gesicki going in this Thursday night game. Jacksonville gave up over 5 catches and 69 yards to the tight end combo of Jack Doyle and Mo Alley Cox in week 1. And then they gave up 2 touchdowns to Jonnu Smith in week 2. Gesicki caught 8 of his 11 targets for 130 yards and a touchdown last week. Devontae Parker is still not 100%, so I think Gesicki is a huge part of the Dolphins' game plan here in week 3. My next guy, I kind of mentioned him earlier, Austin Eckler. Eckler's got 40 touches so far this season without a touchdown. He had a touchdown on 1 out of every 44 touches last year, so I think if his efficiency stays the same, and it looks like it is, I think he can get into the end zone this week. And last but not least, DK Metcalf. This dude, he put the whole league on notice last week. I've said it a million times. Russell Wilson wants to throw the ball more this year. He said it this offseason. And after seeing what this combo of Russ and DK did to the best cornerback in the league last week against Stephon Gilmore, I'm going to pretty much just keep one of these 3 spots just reserved for DK. He only had 6 targets, but he caught 4 balls for 92 yards and a touchdown. That touchdown was apparently the first touchdown Gilmore has given up in man coverage in over a year. But DK was physical, and they got after it, and I think DK is going to be a monster in this league with some of the best coaching in the league and one of the best quarterbacks in the league. If at any point this season he has a game or 2 or, God forbid, even 3 bad games in a row, I would reach out to the DK Metcalf owner, and I would try and buy low immediately because I really think he is the real deal. Let's take a minute here, and we will come back with the Road Dog of the Week.
Oh, you didn't know? Your ass better call somebody!
Road Dog of the Week for Week 3. Wouldn't you know it, the defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs are getting 3.5 points on Monday Night Football against the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore. This is going to be probably the only time we see the Chiefs getting points all year. You're going to have a hard time finding a bigger Lamar Jackson fan than me, but this dude almost single-handedly won me three leagues last year. And I don't know how much money I won on him just betting his rushing yard props. But I'm sorry, I cannot pass up on getting points on the Chiefs. They're giving us the hook, too. It's 3.5 points. Come on, man. You can't pass that up if you're a smart bettor. If you've been watching these games, you can't pass up 3.5 points with the Chiefs. So they are going to be my Road Dog of the Week for Week 3, and that's going to do it for the Week 3 preview of the Kickin' or Stickin' Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you tune in next week. And as always, may the fantasy gods be cruel to your opponents.
You have been listening to the Kickin' or Stickin' Fantasy Football Podcast. For more great episodes and information, follow us on social media and tune in every week. Kickin' or Stickin' is available on Google Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Alexa, Reach.tv, or your favorite podcast service. Kickin' or Stickin' is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. To find out more about this and other great shows on our network, visit us online at hcuniversalnetwork.com today. Fantasy football is fun, but gambling addiction destroys lives. If you or someone you love suffers from gambling addiction, please do not be afraid to seek help. The National Council on Problem Gambling operates the National Problem Gambling Helpline Network. Contact them today at 1-800-522-4700. Thank you for tuning in to the Kickin' or Stickin' Fantasy Football Podcast. Please remember to play responsibly and always look for your man downfield.